Dear students, you are welcome back to STR, Shivarajan's teaching room. In the last episode, we had discussed about spermatogenesis and the structure of sperm. Here in this episode, we will discuss about oogenesis. So what is oogenesis? Oogenesis is the process of formation of ovum. The process of formation of ovum or egg or female gamete is called oogenesis. There is considerable difference between oogenesis and spermatogenesis. See, in the case of spermatogenesis, it begins at puberty. It begins at sexual maturity. But in the case of oogenesis, it begins in the fetal stage of the embryo. When the embryo is 24 months old, 74 weeks old. 24 weeks old. That means the fetus is about 6 months. 6 into 4, 24. So when the fetus is about 24 weeks old in the uterus of the mother, that is, the baby is a fetus, it has the ovary. In that fetal ovary means ovary of the fetus. In the fetal ovary, it will have nearly 40 lakhs of female gamete mother cells. So the fetal ovary, each ovary has about 2 million, that means 20 lakhs, totaling to both the ovaries, it will have 4 million or 40 lakhs of gamete mother cells. The female gamete mother cell is called oogonia. So the oogenesis begins in the embryonic stage. The fetal ovary contains 4 million oogonia. All these oogonia begins meiosis. And you know, meiosis has got 2 stages, meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. During meiosis 1, one diploid cell divides into 2 haploid cells. You know that. See, the fetal ovary contains 4 millions of oogonia or gamete mother cells. And all these cells undergo meiosis first. But the meiosis stops at the prophase. All these oogonia undergoes meiosis first, but meiosis stops at the prophase of meiosis 1. And these cells are called primary oocytes. The oogonia has become primary oocytes. The primary oocytes, what is the specialty? These cells, the oogonia has undergone meiosis 1, but the meiosis 1 stops at prophase. And these are called the primary oocytes. When the baby is born, the girl baby is born, its ovary contains 40 lakhs or 4 millions of oogonia. But all these oogonia, all these primary oocytes, now these oocytes, the primary oocytes begins to degenerate. They begin to destroyed, and one by one they get destroyed. And by the time the girl attains puberty, by the time the girl becomes 10, 11 or 12 years old, majority of the primary oocytes are destroyed and only 60,000 to 80,000 primary oocytes remain in her. And see, before puberty, in majority of oocytes degenerate and only 60,000 to 80,000 remains. Now there is the follicular development. The primary oocytes, see, this is the primary oocyte. This is the primary oocyte. It has a diploid nucleus. Meiosis is not completed. It is in the prophase of the meiosis 1. the primary oocyte gets surrounded by one layer of granulosa cells. So these are the granulosa cells. The primary oocytes are surrounded by one layer of granulosa cells and they are called the primary follicle. The primary follicle gets covered by granulosa cells and two or more layers are developed. At this stage it is called secondary follicle, and the secondary follicle later on develops a cavity inside it. It develops a cavity inside. This is a cavity, and this cavity is called antrum, A-N-T-R-U-M, and the antrum is filled with a fluid. So the secondary follicle develops an antrum, a cavity filled with a fluid. At this stage it is called a tertiary follicle. So that is the follicular development. Then the tertiary follicle matures into graphene follicle. So this is the developmental stage of the follicle. There is primary oocyte becomes primary follicle. Then it becomes secondary follicle. Then it becomes tertiary follicle. Tertiary follicle finally matures into or fully develops into the graphene follicle. So that is follicular development. The follicular development is primary, secondary, tertiary and graphene. So I hope you have understood this. So what is oogenesis? Oogenesis is the process of formation of ovum in females, and it begins in the embryonic stage. And the fetal ovary contains nearly 4 millions of oogonia or gamete mother cells. And all these 4 million cells undergo meiosis, but the meiosis stops at prophase of meiosis 1. At this stage, these oogonia are called primary oocytes. When the baby girl is born, its ovary is having 40 lakhs of, or we can say 4 millions of primary oocytes. But the girl becomes or attains puberty or becomes sexually matured at the age of 10, 11, 12 or like that. So what happens during this period, the primary oocytes are getting destroyed gradually, and by the time she attains puberty, she will have 60,000 to 80,000 primary oocytes in her ovaries. Now the primary oocyte gets surrounded by one layer of granulosa cells, that is called a primary follicle. Then it gets surrounded by 2 or more layers of granulosa cells, then it is called a secondary oocyte, secondary follicle. The secondary follicle develops a cavity called antrum, which is filled with a fluid, and at this stage it is called a tertiary follicle, and the tertiary follicle matures into the graphene follicle. Now at the stage of tertiary follicle level, when the primary oocyte has become tertiary follicle, what happens? Meiosis 1 is completed. So what happens? The diploid nucleus in the primary oocyte divides into 2 haploid cells, but there is unequal division in the cytoplasm. That means one cell is very large and one cell is very, very small, and the small cell is called a polar body and it is destroyed. So at the tertiary level, the primary oocyte completes meiosis 1 and becomes 2 haploid cells. Out of this, one haploid cell is very large. It retains majority of the cytoplasm and becomes large, and the other is a small cell. The small cell is called a polar body, and the polar body is destroyed. So now the tertiary follicle has a haploid nucleus. It is called a secondary oocyte. It is called a secondary oocyte. And later on, the tertiary follicle matures into graphene follicle, and when it is matured as graphene follicle, due to increase in the level of hormones like follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, the graphene follicle bursts and the ovum is released. This is called the ovulation. So what is ovulation? Ovulation is the process of bursting of graphene follicle releasing ovum. It is called ovulation. And this ovulation takes place by the breaking of graphene follicle, and graphene follicle breaks by the sudden increase in the level of pituitary hormones like LH and FSH. What is LH? Luteinizing hormone, and FSH is follicle stimulating hormone. So this is about oogenesis. I hope you have understood this. So the oogenesis, we can make the points like this. Oogenesis begins in the embryonic stage. The fetal ovary contains 4 million oogonia. Oogonia undergoes meiosis but stops at prophase of meiosis 1. These are called primary oocytes. Before puberty, majority of the oocytes degenerate and only 60,000 to 80,000 remains. Then the follicular development. The primary oocyte develops into primary follicle, then secondary follicle, then tertiary follicle and graphene follicle. At tertiary follicle level, meiosis 1 is completed and 2 haploid cells are formed. One is large and one is small. The small is called the polar body. It is destroyed, and the other cell is the secondary oocyte. At this stage, the graphene follicle breaks, ruptures due to the sudden increase in the level of LH and FSH, and the graphene follicle breaks and the ovum is released, and this is called ovulation. Okay, I hope, my dear students, you have understood oogenesis properly, and these pictures will tell you about the follicular development. The primary oocyte becomes primary follicle, it becomes secondary follicle, it becomes tertiary follicle, and develops into the graphene follicle. So I hope you have understood oogenesis, and in the next episode we will deal with the structure of ovum. Thank you.